Heat Seekers, are you ready? It is draft week. We finally made it. The nonsense is hitting a epic level. The smoke screens are billowing all over the world. We don't know what's going to happen, but it's here at least. Hopefully, you are enjoying your week and things are going well for you. This is the IDP Heat Seekers show. We are going to make some random guesses and probably be just as accurate as the experts in the world. But we're going to have fun doing it tonight. So, as always, I'm joined with two of the best in the business, my compadres, my partners in crime. Austin, how are you, my friend? How are things in your world tonight?
Good. I'm glad last week's over. Although I wrapped it up. I don't know. I didn't post to Twitter or anything. But Sunday, I went to a PGA tournament with a bunch of celebrities there. Got to meet DeMarcus Ware, Kyle Fuller,
Look at
Emmett
you,
Smith,
big dog.
Tony Romo. There was a whole bunch of people there. And DeMarcus was super cool. We followed Tony most of the day. He's a really great golfer. And everyone was just super nice, very approachable. It was a lot of fun.
And you name dropped. You're like, listen, I'm a big deal. So,
dude, it was
clearly.
37 bucks to go. Like I couldn't actually say no to that.
Ooh.
Like, yeah, it was professional golfers there. Got to see John Daly. It was a great time, man.
So what we don't know about you, what we're about to find out, is that you must smell like rich mahogany and have a lot of leather-bound books at home.
Oh man, no, I play with knockoff clubs and like a bag that I got from my grandpa. So I'm not good. I just like to play. I like golf. It's fun.
Speaking of fun, Kraig Reith, how are you, my friend?
Ooh.
Tons of fun, as always. I'm doing all right. We're getting over sickness in our household, so I probably sound a bit hoarse. But otherwise, it's draft week. We're doing all right.
It's the worst, and sickness is the worst. And it seems like, well, it is that time of year. I mean, there's colds and flus and all sorts of crap running around down here too. Luckily enough, we've dodged it, at least for the most part, for the last few weeks. But anything's possible.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it is draft week. We are here tonight. We wanted to have some fun. We wanted to, and I'll put it up on the screen so you guys can follow along with us. We're going to make some guesses. We are going to answer some of the most pressing IDP questions with our expert guesses. I don't know, probably no different than some of the experts. But Kraig, this is your baby. This is your brainchild. You take it away, my friend, and let's get to it.
Yeah, so we'll kind of just start, every other order. So we're not answering first on all of these in case anyone wants to engage in any sort of actual game theory, which might not be the easiest thing to do because you have to assume that you're right all the time, and that's not going to happen. But the first questions here are a little bit more limited, so we're just going to start off at the top, and then we'll come back on our recap show next week and we'll show you who was the best out of the three of us, and you can play along at home if you want and let us know how you did. So we're going to start off with the first question. Austin, who do you think the first IDP player taken in this draft is?
I think it's going to be Aiden Hutchinson. Pretty simple with that answer. I think it'll be Aiden Hutchinson. It should be Thibodeau. I think if you're going to take a defensive end, I would probably go Thibodeau, but it'll probably be Aiden Hutchinson. Still going to be a great pick, but I think he's probably going to be the first defensive player off board.
So you're not buying all these smoke screens that have been going up that Trayvon Walker or any of these other guys are going to sneak up into the number one?
They've jumped like 15 spots in the last week for no reason at all.
It's fascinating to me on how this time of year you start to hear these types of things, and the Trayvon Walker conversation was pretty hilarious. I don't remember what pod I was listening to, but they said that the rumor is that Jacksonville loves him. It's like, yeah, yes, he has tools and certainly looks like he could develop, but when you watch that Georgia defense, it's not like he's, heads or tails above anybody on that defensive line where you're like, oh, this is the guy. I mean, Jordan Davis, Devonta Wyatt. I mean, there's some much better defensive linemen that we know can produce. But that being said, I think I'm going to go. I hate it because it has to be one of the top two edges, right? It has to be Hutchinson or Thibodeau. So I guess I'll go Thibodeau just because it's different. But at this point, it has to be one of the edge guys, right?
It should be. Yeah.
What do you think?
It feels
Kraig? Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, it feels like a lot of posturing at like around this time with some of these guys, if that's coming from a reliable source that, Trayvon Walker could go that early. It feels like posturing. Maybe somebody's wanting to move back. Maybe not even anyone at the top. Maybe Jacksonville never even said that. You just never know. These GMs and these teams, the way they get around draft time, it's a circus.
Kraig, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm going Trayvon Walker.
What?
There's a few things behind it. One, I mean, usually Vegas has a pretty good handle on this stuff, and right now he's the odds-on favorite to go number one. Beyond that, and it all depends on who you listen to, of course, and none of us really know. But so Balky and Harbaugh hate each other after how all that stuff went down in San Francisco. Hutchinson is a Harbaugh guy, and that connection now, is that petty and dumb? Yes, but we also know that NFL GMs and teams are not beyond being petty and dumb. So would does something like that play into not give that satisfaction? And if Balky really does believe, and he's the one handing in the card apparently, that this is going to be the next Aldon Smith once they fine tune him and everything, could I see it? Yeah, I could. And if I had to put my money, I mean, I wouldn't be doing it at this point because you could have gotten a lot better odds a week ago or more. But something's up. I don't think that it's all completely random that he's suddenly the odds-on favorite here.
Well, that's the tough thing, I joked about smoke screens early on, but that you start to see that as the draft process goes on. It's like, how do you know what to believe? I mean, to your point, Kraig, I'm reading on ESPN, David Purdom, reported like 10 hours ago, that Trayvon Walker has gone from a long shot to consensus odds-on favorite by all the major sports books. I mean, right now, he went from plus 150 to minus 200 Sunday night at Caesars. I mean, there's obviously where the money is, there's got to be something, right? I mean, because that, those sports books are not going to be doing that unless they think something's there. So I would love it as a Lions guy, because the number two, then we can pick whoever they think's their favorite. Obviously, I would probably lean Thibodeau if you want to swing for the fences, but whatever. That's a good one. That's a good one, Kraig. I like spicy.
Do you think it's not too much pressure on Aiden if he were to go to the Lions, just being from that area, going to school in Michigan? I mean, I'm not saying he can't handle pressure. Clearly, he played highly at a college Division I program that did very well. But some guys that just doesn't pan out so well. Do you think he'd be fine with that?
I mean, he seems to be embracing it so far. I mean, he was at the Tigers game. I think it was the same day that Stafford was there the other day when Miggy hit 3,000. He seems to be buying into it. So if that is the case, then he, I don't know. I mean, the kid seems tough. I mean, for his sake, the thing that I think would help him is that he's all football. Like this guy, he's very much a Dan Campbell type guy when it comes to eating, breathing, sleeping football kind of thing. He's definitely one of those guys. I would think any of these three edge guys in this class, I think all have a really good chance. I mean, they all have the skill set to be successful. I think Thibodeau has the highest ceiling, but he's also probably, I think Walker's the biggest risk, but I think Thibodeau's right there with him, where they have a ton of athletic ability. I think they're both more athletically gifted than Hutchinson, but Hutchinson's proven it and been more consistent, but also has his, little warts here and there where he's getting double teamed at Georgia and just getting thrown around and, and having a hard time. So it's, you pick your flavor of guy. And for me, it's Kyle Hamilton as our mock draft would show.
Kraig, I want to follow your answer of Trayvon Walker up with this. You're very convincing in your reasoning. I'll give you that.
He always is.
My question
he lawyered
would be,
it.
So we talked a little bit before we started the show, and I'm starting to realize I'm probably going to struggle with this because I'm thinking here's who should be picked. I think you're thinking more of who's actually going to be picked. Do you think it's a bad pick to take Trayvon Walker over these guys?
I wouldn't do it. No. I mean, like Brad said, I think he has significantly more risk involved than if you're talking about Hutchinson or Thibodeau, or even, I mean, if I was in charge and at the one pick, I'm probably not keeping it if I don't have to, and probably trading down if I have a team like the Jaguars that needs so much help. I'd rather trade down and get a guy like Jermaine Johnson, who played at a Georgia team. I think it was their championship season. He played there and did well. He had 7 sacks that year, and then he went to Florida State and sort of put it all together. I like what I've seen out of him more overall than Walker. A little bit different of a player. Walker can play across that whole defensive line, where Johnson's more of an edge, but I like Johnson more than I like Walker even. So no, I wouldn't be picking him here. And do I think it's a bad pick? Probably.
Tough in this draft though, right? Because there's not clear cut, number one guy, number two guy. I mean, there's a cluster of guys that people like a lot.
Yeah.
And that makes it tough. Which is why I had posted earlier, I think on Twitter, where I said, I don't even know if we're going to see a trade happen Thursday night, just because there's so much uncertainty and everybody's, anything's possible. Your guy could fall all the way down to you, in the teens, because there's not elite options throughout the draft, or not, there's a big cluster of guys that are, the same kind of tier of value. So but I also think that's what's intriguing about this year is people are so down on a lot of different position groups, but there's still quality players throughout the draft. So
I think we're more likely to have a trade or a few trades at the second half of the draft, where people are seeing those tier drops off for their second set of prospects or something like that, as opposed to, we saw the news come out that supposedly the Chiefs GM said they have, 16 to 18 guys with first round grades. Like, okay, well, where's your cutoff then for guys with second round grades? All right, do we really want to be falling farther than that when we have 2 picks at the end of the first, or do we want to trade up into the teens to get one of those guys that we have a first round grade on? So I think the teens is probably where we'll see more action, but we'll give you a softball here, Brad. What draft slot will the first IDP player be taken?
Well, it's got to be number 1, right? I mean, it's hard not to take that one.
Maybe they get an offer that knocks their socks off, but it doesn't sound like people are doing that this year. I'm in the same boat. Austin, you?
I'm going 2. I'm going 2. And here's why is Ikem Ekwonu is the best player, I think, clearly in this draft. Clearly. It's an unpopular answer. Not a lot of people pay a whole lot of attention to offensive line. This class particularly is not as deep. We'll get to that later in the show. I'll talk a little bit more on that, but I think he's the best player in the draft. I don't particularly think it's close. I think a lot of the reason that, these guys like Kayvon and Aiden Hutchinson are getting, so much like attention for the draft is just because, how athletic they are, how explosive they are, like their games, linemen, they don't get a whole lot of love and attention like that they need. And I think Icky is the guy. So I'm going to say Aiden Hutchinson goes number 2. And he goes to the Lions. But because why not? It makes sense. It's almost like the Jacksonville Jaguars were supposed to take Tim Tebow. Now that didn't happen, of course, but it makes a lot of sense for ticket sales there in Detroit.
Well, yeah, I'm fine with any of the top 2 edge rushers. I mean, really, the interesting thing. So when you look at what's happened throughout the draft season. They've brought back, Cam Robinson and Taylor's there. Like their offensive line, and then they brought in the guy from Washington, Brandon Scherf. The offensive line seems like it doesn't seem perfect. I mean, there's obviously, interior wise, there's some questions, but it's like they've set themselves up to not have to. But I don't know if they would. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they went tackle. I mean, that and people have mentioned Evan Neal and Ekwonu as kind of the best options for a team that needs offensive line help. But also when you think about what's behind them, Jets, Giants, teams with multiple picks, do they package up a couple picks to go up to get the guy they know is their guy before it starts getting murky? I could make the case for it. I mean, again, this is a draft where I probably wouldn't, because most likely you'll get somebody quality falling to you, because who knows what's happening. Yep. Most teams don't know, but
I could very well see tackle. I mean, an offensive tackle to me makes more sense with what they've invested as far as picks and stuff and receivers that they need to get the ball to now on offense. So if they have a guy that they like, I would prefer that they take an offensive tackle and try to just make sure that offense succeeds take some pressure off of the defense, then I don't know that I'd see them doing it, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's the Jaguars. I mean, what would really surprise us out of the Jaguars?
Sure.
And as a Trevor Lawrence owner in fantasy, keep the kid upright. I mean, he was getting just attacked last year. It was crazy.
All right. Moving on here. The last IDP player taken draft slot wise in round 1. So this is me. I never project trades because I think it's too crapshoot. I've never actually seen someone project a complete trade accurately. I've seen people get close. But my little friend group that I do this every year, no one's gotten anything close. And believe me, people love to project trades, as we see on Twitter, social media constantly. But for this one, I am going to go with pick 31. I don't think it's the last pick of the first round. I think either Detroit uses that potentially on a quarterback or, trades down. I know they have a second pick of the first round, or second pick of the second round as well. So that, they have some picks around there. They have a lot of holes to fill. Maybe they trade back into the second with a team that looks to trade up to get a quarterback. So I think the Bengals certainly could use some defensive help here and a defensive tackle, cornerback, something like that. So I'm going to go with pick 31. That swings us around to Austin.
I'll go with 30. And I think it's probably going to be either Boye Mafe or Kyer Elam going to the Chiefs.
Brad?
That's an interesting. I'm going to go 27. Because I don't know. Kansas City could be in the market for, wide receiver. They got 2 picks in a row. Maybe they trade out of one of them. Could they go safety because, the Honey Badger's not there anymore? Maybe. They could use some linebacker help. Maybe they go linebacker. Maybe they go edge. I mean, that's a tough one. It wouldn't surprise me if one of those 2 picks are, but I'm going to go Tampa just because I think Tampa, is aging out in that defense and in the defensive line specifically. And if, a guy like a Jermaine Johnson, like Kraig mentioned, or, one of these big defensive tackles, I don't think Jordan Davis falls that far. That's not going to happen. But, as much as I like Devonta Wyatt, he's a guy I could see slide down, just because Jordan Davis is overshadowing everybody on the interior in the draft so far. So give me 27, although I would be perfectly fine if Detroit went defense in the first round, although I would also be fine with them trading out of that pick. To your point, Kraig, I think they definitely do trade out of it because they don't have when I looked at their draft picks, there's like a huge gap between their 4th round pick and their next pick because I think they don't have a 5th round pick, if I remember correctly. I mean, there's like 100 and some picks between their picks. So it wouldn't surprise me if they got out of that pick. I think you're absolutely right, Kraig.
All righty. You're going back to Austin. So if we have any disagreements on this, we can do a voting amongst the 3 of us on what is considered an edge or not. But who is the first defensive lineman, non-edge player taken in the draft, Austin?
It should be Jordan Davis. Again, should be and will be 2 different things. It should be Jordan Davis. I'm not sure if Trayvon Walker is going to be an interior guy or not. So, I mean, if depending on how you classify Trayvon Walker would be my, how I determine my answer.
I'm fine with discounting Walker, not putting him in here.
All right, good.
If you are, Brad.
Oh yeah, no,
Okay.
I wouldn't think of him as that. I mean,
I
think it
don't
was
see
edge
him
first.
moving inside. No.
And I mean, the nice thing with this sort of, defensive tackle interior alignment position, there's not a whole lot of guys with 1st round grade draft buzz at all. So this one's a little bit easier than some of them we'll get to.
Yep.
Brad?
So I think I'm going to go Devonta Wyatt. I think I have to just to stick with my feelings about it in our mock draft that we did as a team. He's continued to be really strong in that Georgia defense. I know like we're seeing here, off the field concerns are certainly some that could push him down the draft board. The talent and what he's done in his time in Georgia, he's continued to get better each and every year. I don't see a team passing up on that in this draft, especially because they're, like you guys have already mentioned, Some teams only have, a small amount of guys with first round grades. I think this guy, and like most people say, they're pretty sure this is a first round grade guy. I think he's got to go. So I'm going to go with him as my first interior defensive lineman taken. And mostly because, you've heard throughout the draft process, can Jordan Davis be a 3-down guy just because of the size? And, you saw him get gassed a bunch. I don't know that I believe that. Once he gets the NFL strength and conditioning and all that stuff, they'll work on some of those things if the team thinks he can be that. I know Devonta Wyatt can be on the field for all 3 downs, and I'm fine with that. Kraig, what about you?
I'm going with Jordan Davis as well. And the reason is what was mentioned before, those off the field concerns. We've seen teams shy away from that a lot more, especially with those first round picks. If those didn't exist, I think we're probably talking about him as a top 10 guy easily, and potentially higher, especially in a draft like this where quarterback, I guess really outside of wide receiver, there's question marks in that offensive side for any sort of skill position player. But man, if you take a guy and something happens and he's not going to be on the field at all because of the off the field stuff, I mean, even if Davis is a 2-down guy, highly efficient with that, White isn't on the field, is not making an impact at all. And I think teams do get scared off by that. So I'm going to Jordan Davis as well. Although I do agree with you, Brad, like all around talent wise, White's the better player in my opinion.
Yeah, I was doing some quick searches, and he may very well be off the Cowboys' big board because of character concerns. I found that humorous. The Cowboys of all teams would take him off for character concerns.
So by and large, the Cowboys have shied away from any sort of like domestic type of issue stuff that comes out with big news as far as drafting people when that stuff is known. People with other sort of issues and this and that, we all know, Jerry loves a reclamation project. But what was it? Like once that Hardy, I think Greg Hardy was the last one that any of that sort of came out about, and they rinsed their hands of him pretty quickly after they realized that wasn't going away and there was more to it. So I'm guessing Jerry learned from some of his mistakes.
Let's hope so. All right. So what team takes the first DL?
The non-edge. So the defensive tackle you think is going first. Who do you think that would be, Brad? Basically, where do you think your first guy listed here goes to?
Oh, where? So I think in my mock I picked the Vikings. And so I'll go Vikings, which I think is, what are they, 12?
12. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's what team? So Vikings?
Yeah, Vikings. They need, new coaching staff and everything, but that defensive line needs some love, and they need a lot of love. So, and at 12, I don't know they're getting one of those super high-end edges because I could see, 3 or 4 of them potentially going. So give me him there.
I could see, like, the first spot I really feel is sort of in that sweet spot that you mentioned, somewhere in that 10, 11, I mean, not Washington, but 10, 12, 13, 14. I'm going to go 14 to Baltimore. So Baltimore will be my team because I think they really need to start working on reclaiming that defensive line's dominance from years before.
He would be a force with that defense. I mean, that definitely my Patrick Queen shares would be pleased with that. But I mean, they've already focused a little bit on getting some edge help. And they don't, I mean, looking at their depth chart, I mean, it's not strong. Michael Pierce in the middle is, and he's even aging too. I think he's 29, 28, somewhere around there. So that's a good choice. Good choice. What do you think, Austin? Where's Jordan Davis going for you?
I'm wondering if Craig's looking at my screen because I've also got the Baltimore Ravens. I could see him. I could see one of those defensive tackles falling, and I've seen him projected higher than 14 a lot. And I think those are over projections. I think, man, the Baltimore Ravens just feels right. Like you look at the way that they play defense and just like how great of a fit it would be. I think that's probably a little bit of where I would want him to go. But where he goes, who knows? So I'll just go with the Ravens at 14. I'm having a hard time placing him too, because like I'm looking at the draft board, and when I look through it, it's like if he doesn't go at 12 or 14, sure, I can go with that. I don't think Philly takes him. I don't think the Saints take him. I don't think the Chargers take him. It's like, where do they land if they don't land there?
It wouldn't surprise me if Jordan Davis went top 10 to one of the Giants picks. I mean, look at what they brought over Buffalo's OC is their new head coach and head coach, and Don Martindale came over, and I think he's a Baltimore guy. And when you look at that interior, the defensive line, it's not elite. It's not strong. It's probably borderline startable talent there on the defensive line. So it wouldn't surprise me if those Giants picks are both still the Giants picks come Thursday. I could see him going in one of those two, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least. But obviously, he's not my first defensive tackle taken, so it doesn't matter what I say.
Yeah, I agree. They could. I just think there's so much talent that and so much more that they need. I could see them going a different direction, but who knows?
All right.
I'll go ahead.
We're on to me, I think, right here. This is number 6. Yeah. Okay. First edge player taken. Well, since we're counting Trayvon Walker, I guess that sort of fixes that. I mean, I guess these next 2 questions sort of fix themselves based on what we did there. So it'll get us moving along. I'm going to put him to the Jaguars so we get both of these just done right away as it sort of resolves itself. So, Austin, you had Hutchinson and you had him to Detroit.
Yep.
And then, Brad, you had Thibodeau to the Jaguars. Yep.
I guess so.
If you still have time to change it here if you really want to. I mean, this isn't locked in yet.
I mean, I think it's probably it's hard for me because Jacksonville, I mean, it feels like they could do anything at 1. And if you got Kayvon and you put him across from Josh Allen, I mean, like you can't, I mean, what do you do? I mean, that's just insanity. So if I'm Jacksonville, how do you not go after a guy like that? But it just, when you look at it, you're like, ugh, Jacksonville, I hate because you could do anything and you really could.
You could still be 50% right.
Yeah. It could still be the Jaguars, just a different edge. That's true.
Well, or you could be first draft spot taken.
Yep.
But not the
Different
Jaguars.
Team. Yeah, that's possible too.
Possibilities are there.
I'll say leave it to my Lions to trade up to 1 to get the guy that could get it too. that'd be a Lions thing to do, right?
That's
all right, Austin. You're going to be up here for the first linebacker that isn't an edge to be taken. So maybe a little bit, probably not for this one either, but maybe we'll have some differing opinions on this one.
Yeah, I think I've got Devin Lloyd here.
How can it not be Devin Lloyd, right? I mean,
yeah.
Nakobe Dean, I would think multiple teams in the league would not be super excited about a guy who's sub 6 foot in their defense because you hear him talk about. I mean, you hear plenty of experts, blue check marks on the internet talk about him. So I think it has to be Devin Lloyd. But man, I love Nakobe Dean though. Like I really am a big fan of his game. You know, maybe it's the Stephen Tulloch lover when I saw him in Tennessee and in Detroit. I mean, you know, when you have that determination, you're a leader and you're just kind of that alpha on the defense. It doesn't matter how big you are. You know, if you know what to do, you know what to do, and Nakobe Dean does. But I still think Lloyd, like we talked about over the last few weeks as we talk linebackers and rookies. I mean, Devin Lloyd's he's a beast too. So, all right. So, what team takes the first linebacker non-edge? So, is that to you, Kraig, first? Because we started with Austin.
I think
that would be to you next.
Oh, is it to me next? Oh, we're gonna flip. Okay, so let's see here. There's so many teams that could use a linebacker, but linebackers typically don't start. You don't really start seeing them go until the teens. So I'm gonna. Washington took linebacker last year in Jamin Davis. So let me go with gosh, I hate this. I'm gonna go New England at pick 21, but I don't really like it. I mean, I could make the case that Philly does, but he's too big for their scheme typically. I mean, typically they go for guys that are like 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2". The Saints could use a linebacker, but they could use basically everything else too. Oh, that's a rough one. Yeah, give me Patriots. Feels like a Patriots player. If
it makes you feel better, I feel the same way. Patriots, which means it's almost guaranteed not to happen.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the Eagles, they just don't invest in that linebacker really, like as far as draft capital recently at all. And could it change certainly, but I don't see it. They got a couple of guys. Excuse me. They got a
Bless
couple
you?
guys
Was that a
back from.
sneeze?
Yeah, I was trying to stifle a cough.
Oh,
They got a couple of guys back from last year that are still going to be around, and they signed Kazir White, who I think is a really nice fit and really cheap to continue to be there. So I don't see the Eagles going there. I do know some Eagles fans who would really love for him to go there. And, linebacker, unless you're truly like what feels like this time of year, can't miss prospect like a Devin White or Devin Bush or something. You don't see linebackers going that high really anymore. It's
well, and what was
usually around the
Parsons? 11?
teens. Yeah. And I
So-
mean, Parsons is way better. Sorry, Devin Lloyd, but Parsons I like way better than Devin Lloyd myself. So,
I mean, if you look back and we redrafted last year's draft, how could Parsons not be number 2 overall, number 3 overall? I mean, Trevor Lawrence, obviously nobody's going to take him out of that one spot, but I mean, Parsons is by far one of the best players in that draft class last year, and he didn't even go in top 10. So yeah. So what about you, Austin? Where do you think he's landing?
You eviscerated my answer, both of you guys.
Oh, so Philadelphia?
It was my answer, but on second thought, I will actually change it. I'm going to change it.
go for it.
And let's go with I don't want to talk out of pocket here, but I think, yeah, all right, that feels right. So we're going to go, let's see, what spot are they? Let's go with number 17 to the Los Angeles Chargers. Chargers just picked up Khalil Mack to anchor the defensive line, give them some rushing presence, and it would feel like a great fit for them. Kenneth Murray just hasn't worked out. I think Kenneth Murray was flawed when he came into the league, despite his athletic profile, which was off the charts. I wished he would have worked out. As somebody who follows Oklahoma, lives in Oklahoma, I'm not an Oklahoma fan by any stretch, but I wish he would have worked out. But I just don't think he's going to. And I think that just adding that one more piece to that defense, I mean, you think about it, it's a perfect fit. Like to your point, they lost Kazir White to the Eagles, and so yeah, let's just let him pass on from the Eagles right to the Chargers, and say the Chargers made out way better on that deal.
How dare you? My Kenneth Murray shares do not agree with your choices.
I'm sorry, I can't do it, man.
I like it, but that's why I wonder if the Chargers would shy away from it. I mean, just spitballing off the top of my head, like they just got burned last time doing. I mean, what Murray was like pick 22, 23 or something like that, I think, in his class. I love the fit. I think it'd be great for the defense. I agree, it's very different. But sometimes those front offices, once they get snake bit by something, like, we're not doing that again. So yeah, we'll see. I do like the fit a lot. Brad, you were first on that one. All right, me. What team takes the first cornerback? So I'm going with Houston. I think we're gonna finally get to see some differing opinions on this one. There's a lot of talk of them. This is probably gonna. I've had the same question on here twice, so that's not very useful. Maybe
I was gonna say when it got to me, I was gonna say, can we just delete this question? And then when you said why, I was gonna say because we're gonna answer it in the next two questions.
Yeah. So and I mean, really, I can just put this other one on here. Gardner is who I have them taking at 3 overall. I've seen a lot of scuttlebutt that pretty much feels like he's secured it as the first cornerback taken. Whether I agree with it or not doesn't matter, of course, but it kind of sounds like he's probably not getting out of the top 5 if he's there for the Giants. I heard they have a lot of interest in him too. So give me Gardner at 3 to Houston. Then it's to you, Austin.
Yeah, so I have Gardner as well. And I have him going Jets or Giants. I thought maybe Texans. I don't know what they're going to do. Obviously, they're not going to take quarterback, but maybe Charles Cross, who I think is the second best overall offensive lineman. He could potentially go there, although I could see him going further down too. I'm not sure what the Texans are going to do. I have no clue. I'm not going to pretend. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Anything's possible there. So I'm going to say he doesn't get picked there, but he definitely doesn't make it past the Jets or the Giants. He'll be in New York somehow.
Pick which one do you want?
Oh, if you're gonna make me choose, you know what? Let's
Kind
go
of how
with.
this works.
Yeah, I know. Let's go with the man. Let's go with the Giants.
Ed, you're
That'll
up.
be at 5. Yeah.
Yeah. You guys are probably right. I mean, I would probably agree with Kraig, but I'm going to go just to be different. I'm going to go Andrew Booth to Seattle at 9. Seattle's secondary is just atrocious. I know they've got so many other needs, but I'm just trying to think outside the box here because y'all are just mirror images of each other, and that's fine. And you're probably right.
Game theory on us, huh?
Yeah, Ahmad Gardner is probably is arguably the best one in the draft class. I don't know that he's got the high ceiling though. This is kind of another case of, Sauce Gardner feels like the Hutchinson of the cornerback group. Like he feels the safest, but if you look at Stingley's, kind of the intangibles, off the charts, production hidden from all view. Andrew Booth kind of feels like that in between. Like I feel like he has a really strong ceiling. He's produced throughout college. Not been great, but produced and developed each and every year. I wouldn't be surprised if he went to, and I'm picking Seattle here, obviously, but if Kyle Hamilton wasn't here for Seattle to take and restart that Legion of Boom, give me Andrew Booth as a corner.
Spicy pick.
Yeah. I figured I'd try to do something a little bit different.
Yeah,
I could show you my notes, by the way. we have a lot of the same answers. You're right, but not by design. I wish I could disagree more.
Kraig was looking off Austin's homework.
Yeah, well, if we could disagree more, we'd have a much better show. But we just got what we got, right?
Yeah, we don't want to make up lies for the viewers.
We don't want to be like. Never mind. I won't say that. The network.
There's enough fake news out there all over. We don't need to be our own network.
We'll do it live.
All right. I think we're moving up to Austin. And we probably have the first safety here too. But who's the first safety off your board if you have to predict how this goes, Austin?
Well, I know Brad's going to agree with us here, and I think everyone will agree it's probably Kyle Hamilton, who goes to
I am
Carolina Panthers. Yeah, I think he goes to the Panthers.
How does Carolina not take an offensive lineman?
Yeah, I know. I think he'd be a good fit there, and I feel like it's just one of those deals. Like I feel like they're gonna think he's the best player available.
Him next to Jeremy Chin feels disgusting. I mean, that really does lock down that secondary because Kraig knows how much we love Jeremy Chin on this channel. So
what are the Panthers trying to do on offense? It's like get an offensive line for what? For who? CMC? I mean, he can make plays in so many ways, and you still have Sam Darnold. I just think there are things that they could do better. And if you're going to go offensive line, like why not go safety? Best player available. I don't know.
If you're going to go offensive line, why not go safety?
Yeah,
yes, they could do anything. Kraig?
Yeah, I have Kyle Hamilton too. I think that's pretty clear. Yep. Where do you have him going though, Brad?
In my mock draft, I put him to Detroit at 2 because he's my favorite player in the draft.
That's what you want to happen.
But yeah, that's what I want to happen, not what reality looks like. Let me look at a depth chart. I really wanted to put him to the Jets the other day when I was going through and when we went through the mock draft, I was kind of trying to look at what I thought all the teams should do. And their secondaries got some corners, but they could use some safety help. Give me the Jets, seeing as I can't do my Lions. Why not? I think he's one of the top players in the draft class. So what about you, Kraig?
It's going to largely depend on what wide receivers are available, but if their wide receiver targets are off the board, I have him going to the Commanders.
Replacing Landon Collins, is that what I'm hearing?
Well, I mean, and then they have Cameron Curl, who's a really nice piece, but the other one's Bobby McCain, who, just didn't do a whole lot. And, I think he's only there for another year or two on a cheap deal. And if you could have Curl, who is super cheap, and then Kyle Hamilton for a few years on a rookie deal, I mean, just sort of remade that linebacking core. Hopefully your second year Jim Davis can show up and play next to Cole Holcomb, and then you still have that defensive front. That defense could end up being this year what we thought they were going to be last year. So,
but they still haven't fixed their quarterback issue. If they do that,
I don't know that they're going to fix their quarterback issue in this draft either way. So
you don't think so?
I mean, even if they take one of these, top 5 or 6 guys, depending on how you feel about Carson Strong, I guess. Do we really feel any of them are going to be immediate day one starters, or better yet, should be? It's just such a big iffy thing to me, and I'd go with Carson Wentz. You paid for him, see what you can get out of him, see if he can be any better than what he did. Now that the fear of God's been kind of put in him, he's been abandoned by 2 teams in 2 years and kind of embarrassing deals. So
you'd like to hope so. He has the physical tools, but it sounds like he doesn't have the leadership qualities that you want from your starting quarterback.
Well, this is going to bring us to our last question we have here. If you guys think of any others off the wall or funny or anything, let me know. But so we got 32 picks in the first round. How many of those are going to be IDP players? And Brad, you are up first for this one.
Crap. I'm going to go 14.
It has been 14 the past 2 years, I'll have you know. So it's a decent guess.
Whoa! Wow. I was literally just reaching right up in the butt. Here we go. 14 it is.
Turn the camera off if you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no rhyme or reason to it, but when you think about how many teams need, wide receivers and the inevitable quarterbacks and offensive linemen, and I mean, it's like it feels like the offensive side is going to be heavy. And I've been digging more into the whole 5th-year option thing and teams that exercise it, and most teams exercise it. So trying to think about position scarcity and position value and all that. So 14 felt right. Hopefully I'm right, because that may be the only question I get right on this sheet looking at all my decisions.
So I, just for the fun of it, because this is the kind of life that I lead, I had interest in like what historically this has happened, and I wasn't going to go back through all the drafts that we have data for, because that would be totally insane. But I did look at from 2000 on, and it varied by years, because the first 2 years the Texans weren't around, so there were 31 picks, and the Patriots lost a pick 2 years in there. And of course, because it's the NFL, we had 1 special teams player taken in the first round in 2000 by the Raiders, so that
Sebastian Janikowski
a little bit. But over the 700 picks over the since 2000's draft and on, it's been 354 defense to 345 offense. Over the past 10 years, it's 164 defense. But if you go down to the past 5 years, it's 80 and 80 even, which is kind of interesting. What does this tell you? A whole lot of nothing, because really it isn't predictive of the future. Each draft class in and of itself. But it is interesting that it was 18-14 in favor of defense in 2019, and in the past 2 years, it's been 18-14 the other way. So that really, again, doesn't tell you anything. But I thought it was kind of a fun fact, since we're just talking over a number of defensive players taken here. I think there's a chance that there's more defensive players taken than sort of what people are thinking. Yes, it's a strong wide receiver class. It's a strong offensive line class. But beyond that, there really isn't. There's not going to be a tight end. There probably won't be a running back, although we could see one sneak in there. Quarterbacks, usually this time last year, what people are saying, there was for sure 5 were going to go in the first round. Then they're questioning whether there's going to be a 6th. And it's sort of like, we think there's probably 2 going, but is it going to get to 3 or 4? So I think it's going to be a little bit more defensive heavy, and I'm just going to split it, and I'm going to say 16.
Okay. Well, what does Vegas say?
That's the one thing I didn't want to go out there and check before this. I usually do that to see if there's any bets that I like making ahead of time, because I don't look at this stuff enough in advance to make the really good bets that are available when the lines get released. But
I should look at Vegas more. That way I feel like maybe I'll have a better chance of feeling like I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to go with 17, though. I think this is defensively a better class than it is offensively. Kind of like you said, there are going to be quite a few offensive linemen taken in the first round, especially towards the top of the first round. There's going to be quite a few wide receivers that do go, a couple quarterbacks, but a lot of defense, I feel like. So let's go with 17.
Brad, to your point about, sort of the end of that first round, about those teams who they're drafting based on maybe picking up that option, it's kind of interesting because if you go back to 2020, out of the last 6 picks, 4 of them were defense. Of course, CEH was the last pick. He was on offense. But then last year, and I did not remember this, but when I was going through it, I think it was the last 5 or 6 picks were all defense last year. If you think about how the draft went, they had Peyton Turner, Eric Stokes, Rousseau, Odafe Owe, and then Joe Tryon. I mean, that's how the first round ended out last year. So you didn't see anyone moving up to get a quarterback or anything. Not that there were a whole lot of quarterbacks left to be taking at that point.
At that point.
But the 5th-year option is really interesting. But then I'd be really interested to your point to see what positions are they doing that with, that they're trading up for.
Well, and people always say they trade back up to get a quarterback because of Lamar. I mean, like that's kind of the thing that attracts people to go, oh yeah, well, teams are going to trade back in the back half of the first round to get a quarterback because that's what Baltimore did. Well, okay, one team did it, but think about the way that the salaries are structured nowadays and how expensive some of these other premium positions are. Teams are going to trade up into the back of the first round if they love a specific player at a position that's expensive to pay a second contract to, which is why edge would not surprise me in the least to be that. That position is insanely expensive to pay for nowadays because you just don't get premium edge rushers on the market. So when they do get on the market, they're getting paid. So
yeah,
quarterback and edge are the 2 positions that if you told me people trade up to get, I go, okay, well, that makes sense. They're both super expensive.
Well, and we'll see if wide receiver ends up being that too, just the way those wide receiver contracts are getting thrown around here.
Ooh.
And then, the other really expensive, if you end up finding an elite cornerback, the amount of money that you have to pay one of those too. Yeah, it does get crazy.
It's ridiculous. So, all right, people, you can see it on the screen. We are going to revisit it after the draft. We are going to be moving over to the Q&A section of the evening. So we do appreciate everybody that's been hanging out and watching and being involved in the conversation. We do appreciate likes, comments, doing all the stuff that tells YouTube you enjoy our content. We work hard throughout the year trying to give you guys a enjoyable entertainment experience as well as some good information and some fun facts. If you're listening to this in podcast form after the fact, definitely drop a rating and a review. It helps grow the Roto Heat brand as we kick out podcasts. Come back tomorrow night. Tuesday night, we got our Dynasty Heat Seeker show. We got a special guest. We're bringing back an oldie but goodie for Tuesday night. But then Thursday night, we're off because, well, it's the NFL draft. You're going to be watching that and not want to watch Devi. But Saturday night, following the finale of the draft, Saturday evening, we are going to be going live to do kind of a real-time mock to give you up-to-date what we are thinking as a team. So we're going to be going live Saturday night. We'll have some fun with that. So if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you stay up to date. Hit the notification icon so you can see when we go live and keep it locked in here. We do appreciate you guys hanging out with us. We're working hard, pumping out content, adding new team members, and working hard to give you guys a really good experience all the way around in fantasy. And rookie drafts will be coming immediately following the draft. So stick here with us because we got you covered already. We love you guys. We will talk to you again soon. See you.
Unfortunately, though,
And
it won't be an IDP draft. So
yeah,
for those of you watching us, that'll be later on a later Monday night show. So don't get your hopes up to be disappointed.
And we're going to do a Devi mock draft early in May as well. So we're going to be getting you covered with all sorts of mock drafts. All right, so on to Q&A. So that will give me plenty of time to split that up. Here we go. All right, so our boy Cody, where does George Karlaftis end up being picked in landing spot? He's getting 0 love, but seems consensus first round. He's one of those guys that I feel like firmly lands in the back half of the first round where somebody's going to trade back up to get him, right? Austin shaking his head. Yes, you've done shaking your head both ways now. So are you
Yeah,
processing?
I don't
Is that
know
what
if
you're doing?
anybody. I'm not going to project any kind of trade up scenario, but if you're asking me, just heads up on this draft where he goes. I think he probably goes 22 to the Green Bay Packers because, to your point, it's expensive to get a good edge rusher. Well, I think he's good. He does have some things in his game that he's probably going to have to change to be more effective and be an elite pass rusher. But I think he'll be serviceable for the Packers, and the Packers have a need for a defensive end. So feels like he could be a good pick up there up north.
Dallas needs a defensive end. Like, they need help, but they also need offensive line help with all these guys aging out and getting hurt. That was kind of where I felt like it was. What are they, 23, 24, somewhere in there? Kraig, you're the Dallas guy. What do you think there, and where do you think a guy like Karlaftis goes?
I do not think Dallas is going to go defensive line. My hope is offensive line. There's a lot of guys that in that back half that I think would be great. And every time I've done a mock, I've had them take one of them. If for some reason Treylon Burks does fall, I think he goes there just because he's the kind of guy that Jerry Jones falls in love with, and he's from Arkansas.
A tight end?
Sure, if that's what you want to call him. But you hear the stories about him, going out and hunting boars, with a knife, and being from Arkansas. And Jerry loves to have those big wide receivers. So if he falls that far,
traded him away. It's Amari Cooper.
Yeah, he's getting a lot less than Amari Cooper. It's all about that money, Brad. Some teams still believe in the cap. So
yeah, right.
Karlaftis, the last I saw, his over-under was around pick 16 or 17. And I have to go back and look. So that's like around the
Saints, Chargers.
So yeah, somewhere in there.
Wow. Saints have 16-19. Then they got the Chargers and the Eagles. Ravens are at 14, but I don't necessarily think they need edge. They need interior. And then you got Steelers at 20. So yeah, I mean, if it is, it's probably the Saints.
I don't think the Saints are doing it. I mean,
could it be the Patriots? I just think with Judon there, I feel like they have a good enough presence on the defensive line not to feel like they have to go get Karlaftis. And I'm not sure Karlaftis is even a great fit for like what the Patriots like to do, what Bill Belichick likes to do.
Yeah, honestly, if I had to pick, and I think I did this in some mock draft, it might have been ours for Roto Heat. My brain is mush, but Arizona is a fit where they need an edge type of guy. They lost Chandler Jones right now. I think it's Devon Kennard and Marcus Golden are their two edge guys. Yeah. They need another guy that can rush the passer to take a little pressure off of JJ Watt, who I think is still there. I don't think he retired. They have a couple nice linebackers, but they don't really have nice young edge help, and I could see him going there. So
yeah, that defensive line, Zach Allen, they took in the third round a couple years ago, and then Leaky Fotu is the nose tackle. Yeah, if you're thinking about like outside linebackers, you've got Devon Kennard, you got Marcus Golden. I don't know. So I guess this comes down to what do you think Karlaftis is the next level? Is he a hand in the dirt kind of near the line of scrimmage that way, or is he a guy that's standing up off the edge? I don't know that he's got the burst and the get off to be a guy standing up. I think he's probably got to be hand in the dirt and let him use his, kind of his power and his strength to kind of push through. But I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV, so I wouldn't even be able to guess. So I like a guess though, Kraig. I think, Arizona seems primed for needing some help. Obviously Cody thinks the Eagles, and it wouldn't surprise me. I was just looking at their roster here a minute ago when I was trying to put somebody there when we were talking. And they got Brandon Graham, who's, 12, 13 years in the league. You got Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, Derek Barnett. Derek Barnett's 5 years in the league, and he's
basically on a 1-year deal. Sweat, I think they re-signed to a bigger deal. So yeah, if they like him, I could see it there. I just don't know that they're going to invest a first-round pick after investing that money in Hassan Reddick.
Gosh, and when you look at Philadelphia's roster, they just need so much. They could use an offensive lineman probably on the interior. Depending on how you feel about Dillard and Mailata, I guess you could say a guy who could play inside or outside. Depending on how you feel about wide receivers. They could use some help at wide receiver. I mean, Smith is solid.
Watkins back on
Watkins
a 1-year deal or 1 or 2-year deal or
Kelsey,
something, and he's 35 or something. He's going to be. They got to think to the future. Maybe they have someone as a guard for a year or two, and then move him to center.
I mean, that's a perfect spot for a guy like Tyler Linderbaum. That kind of interior. He's really a center, but he could play guard if need be. It's a funny thing. This was a playoff team, but I'm not entirely sure how that happened. When you look at the roster, like it's aging very quickly.
It's the NFC. That's how it happened.
It is. The NFC is just rough right now. So hopefully that gave you an answer. You got a lot of answers to that question, Cody. So it'll be interesting to see Thursday night what transpires in this. But there's so many teams when you look at the roster right now, it's like, wow. There's a lot. It seems like I'm like, I know Detroit's roster is not great and they're in the midst of a rebuild, but I'm like, gosh, I would take their roster over some of these teams' rosters right now. I mean, there's some ugly stuff in there, which, again, to Craig's point, it's the NFC. I mean, the NFC is top heavy right now.
I do feel in this draft, too, if you have a lot of picks, maybe not, even in the first round, but if you have a lot of seconds and thirds and you're trying to fill out a roster, I think this is a really good draft class where there isn't that great premium, quarterback we talked about, or just surefire. Yep, we know these are going to be the first 5 guys off the board draft like we have some years, but there just feels like a lot of guys that are going to be in the league for a long period of time that are just going to be safe floors. They're going to be able to produce and go out there. Even like we talked about with this linebacker group, there isn't that to a lot of people surefire one stud out there, but there's a lot of guys that you get them in the right spot. We talked about, I think it was last night. Yeah. Last week, like Chad Muma from Wyoming, he's a guy that could be an early second-round pick and have a long career in the NFL, but would you call him a complete stud right now? I mean, there's no talk of him even going in the first. So I think if you're trying to fill out a roster like Detroit and you can trade back, from that, to your point, the 32nd pick of the draft and, get a second and a fourth, or something out of that, I think it's a good deal. But we'll see how much of that there is.
Yeah. If I'm Detroit, I want as many picks as possible because they really do. They have some nice pieces, and last year's draft was solid, but there's still plenty of room to go. All right, folks. So it's it. We're done for the night. Again, come back tomorrow night. We got the offensive show going. It'll be a fun week. There's a lot of content to be dropped on the channel. We got a lot of fun stuff that we're doing. So make sure you guys keep it here with us. Thank you guys as always for hanging out with us and being our ride or die. We do love every single one of y'all, and we will see you next Monday.